Well, I'm going to give you a little rundown on what we're doing, and it'll be good. I've got a ton of cough drops up here. I'm probably going to need most of them because I am having some issues with a cough, so I'm sorry about that. But you are here tonight because you are interested in what we're doing, starting a brewery church. You guys are like the volunteer support leaders, interest level, just people we wanted them to know what we're doing so you can tell people or basically you encourage us. So we invited 25 to 30 people and here you are. So thank you very much for coming. The first thing we wanted to do was just kind of the way people are probably going to find out about Brewery Ministries in the church and the breweries, probably through Facebook or something if they don't know us personally. And we made this little ad that we're putting on Facebook and stuff. So we'll show that to you and then I'll talk about what we're doing. So here we go.
Are people born naturally good or evil?
Does God really exist?
Why does God allow evil?
Did Jesus really come back from the dead?
Is the Bible still relevant in today's culture?
If these questions resonate with you and there's something that you'd like to explore on a deeper level, then maybe Church in a Brewery is for you. It's just a casual place where we sit down over a beer and we talk about these questions, some of the deep issues of life, and we just try to figure out who Jesus is. It's not traditional, it's pretty unconventional, and it really doesn't matter where you are in your faith, if you even have a faith background at all. The only thing that you need to be is curious. So if that's something that you're interested in, maybe we'll see you at a meeting sometime.
Starting March 23rd, meet us at Augustino Brewing every Monday night at 7:30.
That's our launch date. We are starting a church and a brewery, as you know. It's a crazy idea, right? So I kind of wanted to talk in between blowing my nose a little bit about why we decided that we were going to start a church and a brewery, who it's for, and part of the reason I kind of wanted to talk about who we're reaching is because this group, as it turns out, is a lot bigger than I thought. As it turns out, there are a lot of people out there who are interested in exploring spiritual topics. They're interested in Jesus and God, but maybe aren't comfortable in a church. And as we've talked to people, we found these people are more common than we thought. So the thing is, that's not just a Brewery Ministries problem. Like a lot of us work at churches. I mean, this is kind of all of our problems. So we've got this challenge in reaching the next generation, and we're finding it extends beyond that. We're kind of all in the same boat. So I thought this would be a good way to talk about Brewery Ministries, but also kind of brainstorm how can we start to reach these unreached groups. So there's a need. My generation's not really in church anymore. The next generation is even less represented there. And that's a challenge that we face. One scripture that really stuck out to me was Luke 19:10. It's really simple. It just says this: Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Whole reason he came was to seek and save the lost. The reason that this stuck out with me was because I've been a worship leader for years. And when I got to my last church, one thing I really wanted to do was help them kind of get going and get more young adults there. And I read this verse one day, and then I started to notice as every week I would be watching the door, like who's new, like who can I talk to and help them get comfortable at church. Well, as it turned out, I just started asking them, how they found out about the church, and most of the time they were leaving another church. And, there's good reasons to leave another church, but after a while I started to notice, wait a second, no one who comes in the door is a seeker or a non-Christian. everybody who comes in the door is already a Christian. So I started to wonder, how are we going to reach the lost unless we go outside of the church? I think there was a time when people would come to the church, like they had spiritual questions, they'd go to the church, and it doesn't seem like that's as common anymore. So it kind of increases the need for us to get creative and go outside of the church. The other thing I went through at this time is I'd worked at a church for a couple years. I had a lot of church friends, and I realized I don't have any friends outside the church. So that was kind of alarming. Like I moved here, I got that job, and then I found that I was completely disconnected with, people outside the church. So if I did want to reach them, I had to change my lifestyle a little bit. I had to try to become intentional about that. And I felt rusty, to be honest. It's a different world. There's good and bad things about that. It definitely showed me some areas I needed to brush up on in terms of answering questions and things like that. But I decided I needed to become almost like a missionary without leaving where I live, if that makes sense. So a question that was important to us as we were going through this journey was, if Jesus was here right now, what would his ministry look like? And thinking about that question helped us ultimately come to the decision to make a church in a brewery. Jason and I were at a concert one day. I go to a lot of local music concerts and stuff like that because I'm a musician. You already know that. But this vision started out as an idea to make a more modern service within my last church. That was the original vision. Just make a more modern service. One, there's a lot of those around, probably. But two, when we were at this concert one day, we were just looking around and we realized, I don't think these people are going to come in the church building. They have no history with it. I loved the church. I grew up in the church, and I have nostalgia and comfort there. I remember when I was 19 or 20, I had a key to my home church, and I would go in there at night because I lived in a house that they owned. I was renting it. And I would go there at night sometimes and just sit in the sanctuary because to me, that was a place of peace. That was a comfortable place. Unfortunately, I find out not everybody feels that way. They've had different experiences, and maybe we can be a part of mending some of those fences. But it's good to be aware of what's going on in their minds. Okay, so we've got this unreached group. We've got a lot of people who are not currently coming into the church. So we designed this meeting in a place where they are already meeting. A brewery is an ideal place to do this because this is where their serious life talks already happen. So they go to a brewery, they meet a friend there, and they get a beer, and they just lay it all out there their whole life. So we've had some very interesting conversations with some people. And what we're going to do, starting March 23rd, at Augustino Brewing, it's at Central and Tyler, is we're going to put together like the most casual service, if you can call it that. It's basically like the core essentials of church. At 7:30, we'll start with a 15-minute topic introduction. So I'll introduce a topic that I think is a question that they're asking. Like, who is Jesus? Is there evidence for God? All these different things. So for 15 minutes, I'll present this topic and then give them 3 discussion questions. Around tables, people can talk about the questions with their friends and just kind of dive in. Because ultimately what we want to happen is we want people to engage in the scripture or the topic themselves, and we want them to explore and discover through the Holy Spirit rather than someone just teaching them. We want them to develop this relationship with Jesus through talking to us and others, and it develop that way. So it's basically a discussion group. And at the end, I'll do a short Q&A, and then I'll do like a 5-minute or less conclusion, because I want to give people a takeaway and be able to frame it for them, because I don't want people to go home with like really wild ideas like Jesus was riding a dinosaur around or anything. Have you seen that picture? There's a picture, if you Google it, of Jesus like riding into Jerusalem on a T-Rex. It's awesome. Okay, so I would like to take a few minutes to just kind of try to understand who it is that we're trying to reach. A lot of people that we're encountering, they're either seekers or young Christians. I would categorize them that way. Maybe a Christian that hasn't really gone very deep yet. A lot of the times we run into people who maybe have a lot of different beliefs than what we have. Universalism, if you know, all roads lead to heaven, all religions lead to heaven. We run into that a lot. And that doesn't surprise me, because I grew up in the church, and for a long time I thought that. That's not what my church was teaching, but in my mind, I had reasoned my way to that conclusion, that all roads lead to heaven. So we experienced that a lot. A lot of people will believe Jesus is just a human, but there is a God. I've ran into people who believe in reincarnation. It might surprise you. I met a guy, I don't know what to do with this. He believes that he was reincarnated and can remember hanging out with Jesus. So I don't know what to do with that. But there's all kinds of different views out there. And a lot of these people are really interested in diving into these topics. All right, now let's talk about what's inside the church for a second, because there's a group there we need to reach too. You guys know Barna Group? They do research on Christianity and religion. Well, this might disturb you, but what they say is 50% of teenagers in the church don't believe Jesus came back from the dead. It's a huge number. So half of the people in the church don't actually believe like the core belief that the church is built on. So there's a group there we need to reach. What I find is that when we're talking to people, we're going to be in the minority in terms of where we are as Christians. We're probably going to know quite a bit more than them. And their views might be all over the board. That's the norm. Don't let it shock you. This actually, there might actually be more of some of these beliefs within the church, but Barna also believes that people are not necessarily comfortable sharing their questions within the church. So they might feel that way, and they might just not tell us. So our goal is to make the environment comfortable and the conversations encouraging enough that they can actually voice where they're really at, because if they don't tell us, we can't help them. So one of the things we try to do is prioritize the essentials. And if I believe something and I find out that they're believe the opposite, we want to make sure that we can still have a good conversation, and that it's okay. It's okay. They're where they are. I'm where I am. We can have a good conversation about that. And if we set that up right, then there's a good chance that through this relationship, maybe they'll learn about what we believe, and maybe we'll learn about what they believe, and then they'll investigate what we believe. So we've kind of got this idea, this model of how we approach some of these conversations. I call it the worldview pyramid. So imagine the food pyramid, but in each section are different levels of our worldview. So at the base of our worldview is some really important stuff that probably determines our views higher up, right? So at the core of our worldview is who are we as humans? Where'd we come from? Does God exist? Up from there might be some other stuff. Political views might be somewhere in the middle or towards the top. Because they're not the core, they're not the base of who we are as people, right? So we try to stay in the base of the pyramid, because the theory is if they come to know Jesus and all of these things are in place, these other things will work themselves out. So my goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to come into a relationship with Jesus and then begin growing from there. So I don't want to introduce too many things from the top of the pyramid because they might be hurdles when the real issue is at the core. They're not sure who Jesus is. They're not sure if they can trust the Bible. So that's where we spend most of our time. Some of that other stuff can be interesting, but you see what I mean. There's some core essentials there. So that's kind of our philosophy, and it's kind of something that we have to do when we're reaching these groups because, like I said, you're probably not going to meet very many people who believe exactly what we believe. Like, they're going to be all over the board. But if they're curious, that's all we need. That's great. A lot of the people that we've been encountering, surprisingly, maybe the largest group is people who have had a bad experience in church, which is a sad part because we talked about, like, we grew up in church, or we see that as a great positive place. But I think if we start to dive into why they feel that way, we have a chance to mend some of those fences or build trust. So the generation that's coming up now must be high school. David, you might know this. One of the generations is considered to grow up, like, be the first generation to completely grow up outside of church. Would that be, what's that generation called?
Oh, I don't.
Okay.
See?
Might be. Okay, yeah. Now, we know they're not, like, totally growing up outside of church, but they're largely underrepresented. So they don't have any history with church, and they don't have that nostalgia that we have. So part of the reason we made the Brewery Church is we're trying to make something closer to what they feel comfortable with and what they understand. Because we think they're asking the same spiritual questions that everybody else has asked over the history of mankind, right? We're, like, internally programmed to wonder, where did we come from? Is there a God? Who made all this stuff? So we can take advantage of that and move them into an environment they're comfortable with. So that's one group, people who didn't grow up in church. But then there's this group that has been hurt in some way. They're still just as interested, usually, in spiritual things. They just might not be comfortable in the church. So they're a good candidate to come to the brewery and talk with us. I would imagine you know somebody in that boat. Like I said, none of us are happy about that. It's kind of a sad thing, but it's a reality that we have to deal with. And my experience, this group has usually had an encounter with legalism. So, I met one person who, I can't remember what happened to this guy. I'll share about somebody else. I met one person who had like a really bad experience as a teenager, and they were shamed in Sunday school for asking a question, and they didn't want to share anymore. I met someone else who has kids, and they were going to a church, and the church had a school, and they tried to enroll their kids in the school. Well, then they received a letter that said, well, if you're not tithing, we might not let your kids into the school. And so that really hurt them. So then they kind of stepped away, and they'd been in church for quite some time. The husband had kind of been on, unsure of his faith for quite some time, but he was there for his wife. His wife had never questioned her faith before. All of a sudden, she's questioning her faith. But these people are all over the place. I mean, I'm surprised at how many there are. And I can relate to some of what's we've all probably had our own bad experience in the church before, but we have a large enough body of work and understanding of what the church is to know that that's not the norm. So, anybody ever had a bad experience in the church before? Not everybody, a lot of people. I'll share one of mine that I had a year and a half ago. Now, this happened with someone who no one in here knows. They didn't go to my current church, and they didn't go to my last church, so we're safe. But just to give an example of something that does happen And this actually helped me to be able to relate to maybe what some of these people are feeling. So I sat on at this Bible study one time, and there was a guy there I'd never met before. Talked to him for 45 minutes, had a Bible study, and at the end of it we were getting ready to pray. And so he was asking about prayer requests, and I said something like, yeah, I've been going through some difficult situations, and I've kind of been a little bit depressed about it. He's like, tell me more about that. And he latched onto that, and then told me then that I wouldn't be depressed if I just read my Bible like I'm supposed to. So then he asked me, when's the last time you read your Bible? I said, this morning. He said, prove it. So he put a Bible in front of me and said, open it. I said, okay. So I opened it. He's like, show me what you read. So I went to it. It's like, show me what you got out of it. I'm like sitting here like feeling like I'm being grilled or something. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling. So I told him. He eventually kind of eased off. But like it was a very tense, like uncomfortable moment. And he did tell me that he really didn't believe me because he thought if I would just read my Bible, I would never get depressed. I'd be like invincible against it. That's hard sometimes. It's just not necessarily true. I'm sure it could help me. And, it was a tough situation, but that moment helped me to understand what some people who have been, hurt by the church and don't want to go, what they might be experiencing. Like I said, not the norm. You guys are all awesome. But that situation also showed me something else. We might need training. I've talked about how different their mindset is. It actually takes a lot of work to get inside that mindset and understand where they're coming from. I mean, that's been a really healthy thing for us to do the podcast and just to have conversations with some of these people. Because, for us to learn to empathize with them, I mean, it takes some work, and since we've grown up in the church to understand their experience, it's hard for us to step outside of what we know and then to step into what their mindset may be. That guy that I was just talking about, he later on in that conversation said something about how his family doesn't want to be around him, and he said it's because he's a Christian. And I was kind of sad because I thought maybe it has more to do with the approach, but he doesn't know. So that was kind of a sad thing. But that was an extreme example, but I think we could all use some training of some kind. The other things we've heard, things that might contribute to a negative view of church is, and again, my goal is to help you understand how they got that way, and maybe what some of the barriers might be that we have to try to get through when it comes to reaching these people. TV doesn't necessarily help. It's not always portrayed Christianity in the most positive or accurate way. I remember seeing an episode of Grey's Anatomy when I was in college. It's like Christians were portrayed as crazy people. Well, if they have no experience in church and all they see is this stuff, how are they supposed to know what Christianity is? I think the political climate confuses them. They see a lot of arguing and they hear Christianity thrown into the mix, and it misrepresents what it is. It just confuses them. To an outsider, they don't know any better. So what we have now, all of us, this is the environment that we are left to deal with. These are the people around us, and we have to find ways to get around these problems. So I tell you all that. These are some barriers and some things they're experiencing. So does it make sense now why, if we just try to invite them to church, why they might be confused or hesitant, or maybe say no? Okay. Doesn't mean we shouldn't invite people. I think we've got a really great church here, and a lot of people might come. But some people might not. doesn't necessarily have anything to do with us. There's a large, long, lifelong experience playing into this. But the good news is that despite that, most people have a positive image of who Jesus is. So it seems like whatever their view of church is, I can't find anyone who has a negative view of Jesus. No one. So that's good. So we created our meeting, and it starts in March. A couple of the things that we're doing to kind of spread the word about it is word of mouth. We've got some business card flyers. They look like business cards, but you can put them in your pocket, and then you can give them to people who you think might be a good fit. So, like, if you've got family members or friends, and you think, like, they've never been to church or they've had a bad experience, they might be a candidate for our meeting. And from there, like, ultimately, we're kind of trying to be a bridge between us and churches. Or, like, a lot of people might not ever leave our model or some kind of alternative form of church, but some people might, particularly if they grew up in one and they're familiar with it. So we would like to be able to kind of be a bridge and send them where they fit or where they would like to go. We've got some window flyers. We do the podcast. We've sent out a press release. We're doing some Facebook marketing, going to get it on the event calendars. And we spent a long time building a relationship with the brewery that we're having this at. It's Agostino Brewing. And one of the first things that we started doing was just going there. So we'd go there, have a beer, talk to the owner, get to know some of the people. And then I started actually booking bands for him, because since I'm a musician and I've been doing a music podcast for a while, he was struggling to book bands, and he didn't know any of them, didn't have time to screen them, and he didn't have time to make flyers and stuff. So he started asking me if I would do some of that for him. So I was like, yeah. And it was a good opportunity for us to build this relationship with them. And one of the awesome things that came out of that was the very first time I talked to him about the brewery church, we were talking about, we were going to rent their room. And it was going to be pretty expensive. I mean, it was $150 to $200 per night. So, 4 to 5 times a month, you're looking at $800 or more. He ended up waiving that. So he's going to come in, run the bar while we have the meeting, and he's not going to charge us. Now, once we get going, I'm expecting to kick back something to him, especially he's doing us a huge favor, but he's also coming in on his day off to do this. Because the brewery's closed on Mondays, so it's just going to be open for us, which is cool, because then, like, if people want to come to the brewery and they didn't, want to be a part of the brewery church, it eliminates that problem, because the only thing that's going to be going on there is the brewery church that night. So that'll be cool. Okay. So I feel like I've kind of become an ambassador for the church to the brewery, to the people, and that's kind of what we've become. On our flyer, I've heard some. Okay, we talked about marketing to people who are a little unsure about church, right? I've seen some very shocking approaches to that. We're not going to do anything like that, because we have a positive view of church. But our flyer might say, if you felt like church isn't for you, try this one. And there's a reason that we did that. Because we don't want the group that we're not trying to reach to come. We want the group that we are trying to reach to get this message and be there. So we had really a conundrum when we were trying to come up with the title. What do we call this meeting? Do we call it a church in a brewery? And ultimately, we decided yes, because then people who have wished they could go to church, or there was a church for them this whole time, will see church and brewery, and they'll put it together like, oh, this is for me. Like, this is a relaxed place. Because if you say there's going to be beer there, they're automatically like, oh, thank goodness. Like, I don't have to, like, put up this guard and wall, and I can be myself. So it's kind of a disarming way to market ourselves. So now when we just say church in a brewery to people, like, it's like a light bulb goes off in their head. They're like, tell me when, I'll be there. I mean, we've gotten that response quite a few times, so it's cool. Now, whether or not they actually show up, I don't know, but we get a fairly exciting reaction. But the way that the brain works is really interesting. When I'm talking about people who are traumatized by church, part of the reason we have to train is because some of these people are carrying like some trauma. So the way the brain works, I heard this on a TED Talk a couple years ago. It catalogs information, right? So you're born with kind of a base template of emotions, but it continues to build and catalog things. So sometimes it's got like a matching system. If you're faced with a situation that you've never been in before, and your brain's trying to figure out, what signal do I send? How do I tell you how to feel so you know how to respond? If it's never been in that situation before, it's going to find the closest thing to it, and it's going to send that emotion. The problem with that is it makes mistakes. So, what would you do if you saw a grizzly bear?
Run.
You'd run, right? Because you know danger, right? Your brain sends you the signal, danger, run away, danger, right? Well, something similar is happening to them in certain situations. I don't know what triggers it. Maybe a person who seems to have very strict beliefs or something, or maybe it's just walking into a church. I think the brain is sending them a signal telling them they're not comfortable. They might not even know why. It might be a mistake, but it's something that's happening. So we're trying to restore that comfort. We're trying to disarm that situation and help them so they can get in a setting where they can just talk about Jesus. So we've taken away a lot of the traditions from our meeting. There's no music right now. It's really just going to be based around the discussion group. Very, very casual, so that none of those alarms go off, or minimal alarms go off. And we'll all be trained to facilitate discussion in a way that like allows them, if they're not ready to accept something, that's okay. They can stay that way because we trust the Holy Spirit to get them there and be the teacher. They've got to be willing in that equation. But if we can't convince someone of something, if the Holy Spirit can't convince someone of something, what am I going to do? There was a book that David had me read called Spent Matches. It kind of had that mindset. So we kind of have this hands-off somewhat approach where we'll engage as far as they're willing to go, but it's like they've got to travel this path themselves. We'll be there as a guide, but they've got to do the legwork. If I do all the lifting, then it's not really their journey. So we're trying to learn to become guides. And it's hard. Like when you realize that you are talking to someone who like you're way ahead of in terms of theology or something, it's work to scale back. Like you have no idea what some of these people don't know, and it could shock you. Like I've spent weeks talking to someone just to find out that they had a different Jesus than I did, and it took a long time to figure that out. And the people don't know. Like I heard a church planner talking about how he gave a Bible to someone and started reading through it, and they were seeing the verse numbers and thinking they were footnotes. So they're like looking for all the footnotes and they can't figure out why things don't match, and then they go back, and that's something that I take for granted. I would never think, because I've known how to read a Bible my whole life, we would never realize that they don't know what the verses are. So we run into things like that. I somewhat think we have to be conscious that we have 500 physics course level knowledge, and they may walk right into that and be totally lost. We have to be conscious that if they did walk into a church service and they have no church history, it could be like walking into Spanish 300 level, and how would we know unless they tell us? So the discussion environment is helpful because we can start to ask some of those questions, but I'm trying to remove as many terms as I can that they might not understand, just to make it as easy as possible for them. So that's an interesting challenge in itself, because you're trying to learn to explain some difficult concepts using language they can understand. We get better at it as we go, but we're constantly discovering, especially on the podcast, oh man, people are going to get lost at this statement or things like that. And it's really interesting. Okay. Another part of the reason that we think the training is so important is Barna research also shows that they talked to some Christians who were explaining their faith to non-Christians. And then they asked the Christians how they thought they did. Like, how'd that conversation go for you? Was it positive? Was it negative? And they're like, oh yeah, it was really great. Guess how the person on the other side of the conversation felt about that? Not great. But, so I have that information. What do I do with it? How do I make that conversation great? So that's kind of something that we're trying to figure out. Sometimes we feel like we're successful at that because people want to talk to us about it. So that's a good sign. But, at the same time, we're trying to figure this out too, and it's difficult. But that's what our training is going to be for. Okay. So I'll talk about training for a second. Our initial plan when we started this was in June. We started working on this Church in a Brewery launch. And we thought, once we get to the launch, after that, we'll start training for people who want to become leaders or facilitate another group or something like that. Or even if they're going to be working with our people or meeting them, we'd kind of like people to have a base knowledge skill set of conflict resolution and stuff, because you're going to have people ask you about politics and all kinds of crazy stuff. And how do we navigate potentially explosive topics with these people in a good way so that we don't lose that opportunity to talk about the conversation that matters, the conversation about Jesus. So one thing we'll be doing in the training is trying to figure out basic conflict resolution skills, how to have those conversations in a positive way, how to scale back again and let them kind of take the lead on their journey. And the other part of it is, I forgot. Give me a second. Oh. Oh yeah. I want it to be like a support group, like AA, because when you start, meeting with people who are unchurched, I mean, they're going to ask you some hard questions. It's really tough. So I thought, well, it'd be great if we could have the support group where we show up and we're just like, man, someone asked me this question, I totally botched the answer, and this is what I said, and what can I work on for next time? Or maybe you said the right thing, but they still had a really negative reaction. How do you know that you did your best? How do you support each other through that? Because that's part of the thing here is results aren't necessarily, especially immediate results, are not necessarily going to be an indicator that you did the right thing or not. That's part of the challenge of this, because people have their own resistance and their own, bearer signal, danger signal going off in their brain, that it's difficult really to gauge what we're doing on purely results. But we also have to evaluate. We have to perfect our part in these interactions and make it as loving as possible. So we'll be outlining some training, and if you are interested in that, let me know. Because we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we'll be working on that over the next few months. And I would like to know just generally how many people are interested in that or something. And if you start to do that, one of the first things I'll probably have you do is like pick someone who has no church background, just start meeting with them, like over coffee. Just listen to them, like just be exposed to their world. You're almost going to have to get comfortable. Like for us at the brewery, we have to get comfortable having conversations with people who are like total sailors, like hundreds of swear words in a short conversation, and that's it, But I don't want to necessarily have that conversation with them. I want to have the conversation about Jesus, so I'm going to let them be them, and you almost have to get used to it. So, but that's okay. The conversation that matters is everything. Okay, so final thing is our approach here. We kind of talked about we want the Holy Spirit to lead these people in their journey. That's really important. So one of the ways that we're planning to facilitate that is that we're gonna encourage people to wrestle through Scripture themselves, and we're also gonna just encourage generally a culture of investigation. I'm not afraid of any question. I've grilled the Bible on my own as much as I need to know that there's a large body of evidence for it. And it's unbreakable in my eyes. There's just so much behind it. So I'm not afraid of science. I'm not afraid of their questions. I'm not afraid of philosophy. I embrace all of those things as other ways that God teaches us about this world that He created. So what I'm going to do in this group is like anything that you believe, have you checked it out? And hopefully we can all investigate those things together, and people will begin to investigate it. Because if I'm not afraid of the Bible, there was a point where I realized that I hadn't checked out a lot of my own views. And part of that process is what brought me to embracing my faith. So if someone comes to me with like a really controversial issue, or let's say they're not sure if Jesus ever said He was God. They don't think He ever said He was God. If they ask me, and I'll be willing to tell them what I think about that. We can't hide that, But I'll share one. First, I want to share in a way where it's okay for them to keep their view. They've got to make that decision on their own, right? They have to own their decision of who Jesus is. But then I might say, why don't we investigate that together? And then we read the Scriptures and talk about it. Or I tell them to read it, and then we'll talk about it after they've read it. And what do you think? That type of thing. So I'm not hiding what we believe, but we're letting the Holy Spirit lead that journey. Because I know that I don't have the power to convince anyone, and it really be a lasting decision. It's got to be theirs. Okay, so this is a very messy job. It's an awesome job. It's really exciting, but it's messy, and you don't come out looking good all the time either. We know Paul. He ended up in prison, and I'm sure that's not how he imagined that his successful mission was going to go. And funny stuff happens from time to time. Like I stream. I tried to live stream some music a couple weeks ago, because I stream. From my music page, like other bands at the brewery and at another venue and stuff, and I knew one of these guys was like really sailor mouthed and stuff, so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna wait till he starts the song and then I'm gonna hit record and stuff, and so I do that, but then like as soon as I hit the play button, he like just starts talking to the audience and like yells a bunch of swear stuff. It's coming from my page. I'm like, well, hazard of the environment. I'm not always going to look great and squeaky clean. It's going to be funny. But it's funny as Linda probably knows exactly who I'm talking about. So then, like 2 weeks later, I went to the brewery and I streamed another band. And then like their song's about marijuana. And I'm like, man. Got to stop doing the live stream. It's hilarious. there are some hazards that we are aware of. For example, obviously there's going to be alcohol there. We've met people already at bars that obviously have an alcohol addiction. On the plus side, they'll tell you everything about their spiritual journey, but then they might not necessarily follow up later. So we know that we may have to figure out how to help people who come to this who might have an addiction. And I have some contacts who work for addiction ministries that are Christian-based that I'm hoping to partner with, or at least I know I can at least get advice from them to kind of help us, because this is uncharted territory. We don't want to enable anyone. I know one concern when we started to do this was people thought, well, if you're having the church there, people will just go there as an excuse to drink. That could happen. We can't control everything, but reality is they could go there any night of the week, sometimes during happy hour, and pay less, and have a drink and not have to listen to me talking about Jesus. So I think there will be some things that we do have to work through, and like I said, it's going to be messy, but it's going to be worth it. What we'd like to see ultimately with our organization is we're hoping that more people will start to think about reaching unreached people. So you're all here tonight not necessarily because you're going to partner with Brewery Ministries or something, but there are unreached people around you, like the people we're talking about, and you could reach them. Maybe you have a relationship with them. You're already in a position to do that. So you might be the primary ideal person to reach those people. Or maybe it's a combination of us working together. Maybe you can give them one of our little cards. I'm going to give you a bunch of little mini flyers and a fridge magnet. But these are these little cards. We want to be a place where people can go to explore their spiritual journey who feel like right now there's no church for them. There's nothing for them. And we don't want to do it alone either. We want to be doing this like in coalition with other churches. We don't want to be an anti-church group or something like that. We want to do this as a partnership. So we'd like to see us working together in some capacity to get unchurched people to the brewery church. And then we're hoping that once this one gets going, we can start more. We would ultimately, I'm primarily interested in making sure that in 20 years, the next generations still have church. Now, it might be sad if it doesn't look like what our church did, but all that really matters is that they've got this message and that they've got other people going through this journey with them. So if we can find a way to give them that, then that's all that matters, is their relationship with Jesus. So ultimately, we are hoping that there will be more brewery churches that come out of ours. If they're not, then something's not quite right. Multiplication is the goal, and we'll take it as far as it will go. We've got Jason here, and he is our liaison to other churches. So part of his job is to touch base with other churches, tell them about what we're doing, and he's also going to present this 5 ways you can be involved. So if you're wondering, you've heard all this stuff, okay, this is Brewery Ministries, I'm telling you, get in the game. He's going to give you 5 practical ways that you can do that. So, without further ado, I will introduce my sidekick, Jason Moyer.
I'm not going to be the smooth talker that Nathan is. You'll hear a lot of ums and ums and ums out of me, so I'm not quite that good, but that's all right. And I won't talk as long either. Just kidding. So, as Nathan said, I'm kind of the contact and the partnership person. I've been starting to get flyers out to churches and get our support packet that you have to churches. I've kind of backed off of that. It wasn't a real success at first, but once we get going, I think that when the word starts to get out, that those support packets will be useful for churches that we're going to be trying to partner with. And so don't want to talk too much about what Nathan said, but many people in their churches, we've been hearing as Christians, and I know a lot of you, and I know you've been Christians for a long time, and you've been hearing in church, invite, 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 and we try, and then we see our neighbors next door, and we try and invite, but it's always uncomfortable, and it's always kind of a squeamish kind of thing, and you know, we invite non-Christians into our world, into our church, but why would they want to come? They know what they're going to get. They know that they're going to get, a lot of the times, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. Stop doing what you're doing. There's a heaven and there's a hell, and they hear the hell part, that kind of stuff. So why would they want to come? You know, so it's hard to get people to want to come. So this is a place where we can refer seekers and non-Christians who are spiritually interested without having to invite them to a regular, normal church. The other day at my work, I told somebody what I was doing, we're starting a brewery ministry in a church, and he said, "No, that's the kind of church I can get behind." See? This is a non-Christian guy, but hey, he might show up, he might come. This is the kind of church he can get behind, and he'll just hear a spiritual conversation. So I don't know how much Nathan, he didn't hit on this a whole lot, but we would love to be able to take people from seekers and non-Christians, and as they grow, get them plugged into a traditional church. That's where they can start to really grow and start to understand the word of Jesus. And so we're asking people like yourselves a couple things. One, invite those people or tell those non-Christians that you know are spiritually interested that we exist. And that this might be a place for, hey, somebody does not think that they would fit in a church, but they're just spiritually interested. This might be a place that you can actually invite someone to, that you can send someone to. So we also recognize that a lot of these people might not ever get into a traditional church after they've been with us for a while. And that's fine. They can stay with us for as long as they want, and they can keep going to the Brewery Ministry Church. But ultimately, we're hoping that they will grow spiritually and they can get into a church and they can be one of those Christians going to a church and grow. So a couple other things here. We are now a 501c3 organization that's been approved, so that was a big hurdle and a big step. And there is a very good chance that we can run into people with real and immediate needs, and now that we're a nonprofit, we can help out with those kind of things as well. And we've filled out all the paperwork and been approved, and that was quite the journey. We're very excited. This has been who knows, 8, 9, 10 months of planning, and it's finally here. So that's really awesome. So a couple questions for everybody. First question is, do you know of any churches that might have a pastor or leadership that might be interested in partnering with Brewery Ministries? The leadership at Asbury Church has been extremely supportive of this. And they are interested, and their pastor is very interested. We're kind of sad that he couldn't make it tonight, but he had a prior engagement, so he wasn't able to come tonight. But so that's one question. Again, do you know of a church that has a pastor or leader that can be interested in partnering with Brewery Ministries? And a second question, do you know any people who just will not go to a traditional church? I would say there's probably a good chance that you do know that person. Am I right? You know a person who just will not go to a traditional church for whatever reason that may be. There's 100 reasons. So I'd like to encourage you to read the packet that you guys were all provided, but I want you to give them away. Give them out, and we can provide those all day long, as many as you want. We'll give them to anybody that you want, but just give them away. Give them away to friends, churches, whatever. This little card that Nathan handed out is pretty cool. Give those out. Another thing, we'd like to come and talk to your church, to your small group. We'd like the opportunity to explain that what we're doing to a small group. Some people might be very interested in that. So I'll be very quick here. We're talking about if we look at this trifold, the 5 ways that you can be involved with Brewery Ministries. And number 1 is just spread the word, like what we've been talking about. Like, spread the word to your neighbors. Find those people that will not go. People who have spiritual questions but have never investigated them. Find people who haven't been able to get comfortable in a church, traditional church. People who would like a more interactive, discussion-based form of church. All of those kind of things are very good. Pray for us. We're kind of a mess. I'm a mess. I could use prayer. If y'all want to pray for me every day, that'd be great. But we're kind of going into a battlefield, I feel like. I have explained this concept. Nathan was talking about the people that are, this is a great idea. This is wonderful. And I've run across people who said, what in the world are you doing? You cannot have beer in a church. The legalism portion of this thing. You're just going to get a bunch of people drunk. This is ridiculous. This is one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard. And I've gotten that twice now. So it's pretty good. It would be good to have people praying for our safety. This isn't necessarily the safest place. When there's alcohol, things can get out of control sometimes. That's just the way it goes. But we're okay with that. We're protected by the Holy Spirit, and we feel good being in a place like this. So another way, the third way, is to observe a meeting. Just get a hold of us ahead of time, and we would love to have anybody observe a meeting. We haven't actually had one yet, so we'll see how that goes. But so give us a couple weeks and then observe. No, it's okay. Definitely, we would like to have people. And then if you see what we're about, then you might be more inclined to want to get involved with us. The fourth way that you can get involved is to volunteer. And I was told it's okay to say this name. So we were talking about our training program that we're coming up with, and Mr. Olsey here, I believe, is helping us with that, from what I was told, and don't shoot me if that's not true. But that's a really strong person, and a really with a lot of experience, who I think could make a help with some wonderful training for people. And then we would love to just get you involved once, and the training is understanding the perspectives of non-Christians and their thoughts on the Bible and what they think of the Bible. A lot of us are in the world. We know what people think of the Bible. It's just a bunch of stories, all that kind of stuff. And that training will go a long way in helping you say what, a gentle way and a nice, thoughtful way of saying things, I believe. And the fifth way is, and we've kind of already touched on this one, is to talk to your church about partnering with Brewery Ministries. I think it's wonderful that Asbury is wanting to get involved with us. Nathan and I spoke with was it Baptist, what is it? American Baptist. We spoke with how many? About 10 American Baptist, about 10 American Baptist church pastors at a luncheon, and I would say we had some good support. I mean, some favorable support in that meeting, which was kind of cool. So if we can come to meetings like that, that would be great, like the American Baptist churches. There were a couple of people that were really, really interested. There was one that says, here's a check, but I don't want to know anything else. And that's okay. You know, that's pretty cool. It's there's some value here, you know, and I hope that other people can see that. Our newsletter. So we have two different types of mailing opportunities. We have a mailing opportunity for folks as yourselves who are supporters. And that list we have on the support table back here. Just if...
The hidden one over here?
Yep, Heath has it back there on the support table. So we have that mailing list. And what is that one mostly going to be telling them?
It's updates, kind of behind the scenes stuff. That's stories about how people are doing, who are attending, things like that. Okay,
so that's a great way. And the second one is the mailing list for attenders. And the attenders will get to, or attendees, I'm not sure which it would be, the people who are coming, they'll get to, their mailing list will have upcoming events, and we do plan on having more events than just our weekly meeting. We're going to need to nurture these relationships more than just once a week at a bar. So we're planning on grill outs, barbecues, being with these folks as we start to make relationships with them as we would in a normal church. So, and then that is available on our website. So if you can funnel people to our website as you run across them and say, hey, check out breweryministries.org, and that will give you the information about what we are. So now, just about completed here, my wife Dana put together a video about who we are, the team members for Brewery Ministries. Okay.
The remote wasn't working earlier.
So this is a video about the four of us who have been involved from the launch of this.
For all of my adult Christian life, I have had the desire to fulfill the Great Commission to go forth and make disciples, but I haven't been very good at that because I'm naturally very introverted, and it's just kind of a struggle for me. Let alone, all of my friends have always been saved Christians, so I've limited my opportunities in that way. So it has been difficult. I have enjoyed doing short-term mission trips and mission-type work, except for those kind of things can be very expensive and they're not very practical, and it's very difficult to leave home for any length of time. So that has not really worked out as a long-term solution for reaching people for Christ for me. Over the years, I have learned that making friends with non-Christians is really the best way to get to know them and be able to start having spiritual conversations with them that are not awkward and are very natural. Brewery Ministries is a very practical and easy way to get to know non-Christians. We can have spiritual conversations with them that are low pressure and easy to handle, therefore making it a good time for everyone involved.
A little while back, I was at a music event with Nathan, and we met this guy at a local joint, and he would want to send his kids to church, but he wouldn't go because he had a bad experience. As time went on, I heard a lot more stories like this, and I wanted to be a part of these people getting back into the faith and loving people instead of seeing that their bad experience was a hindrance to them continuing in their faith. And then I like beer, so the opportunity presented itself to where I could join in the place where these people were already at, and that just, they lit a fire in me, and we're going through with it.
I became a Christian when I was in my early 20s and have been attending church since 2001. I started out in a Baptist church when we lived in Arizona. Since moving to Kansas, we've attended a Disciples of Christ church, a non-denominational church, and we're currently at a Methodist church. One thing that all of these churches had in common was they taught us how important it is to share the good news with people. Being the shy person that I am, this has always been a struggle for me. But I also recognized how important of a mission it is. So what I would do is I would sign up for whatever outreach project the church was offering in hopes that this would somehow help me to talk to people about Jesus. Sometimes this looked like going door to door in the nearby neighborhoods. Other times it was just volunteering for whatever community event the church was hosting. Either way, I never really felt like I had a successful conversation with anyone. And if I did talk to someone, I always worried that the conversation was perceived as forced or scripted. One thing that I'm really excited about for Brewery Ministries is that we get to meet people where they are in an environment that is already familiar to them. To me, I think this sets the right foundation for forming relationships that will lead to real and natural discussions. The other thing that I'm excited about is I'm not on the hook for changing people. I mean, if I'm honest, I don't even think I can change myself. But our team recognizes that it's not our job to change people. That's God's job. And that allows us to focus on investing in relationships and loving people.
A few years ago, I was working at a church, and we were trying to get a young adults program started. And something that really started to bother me during this time was I just started to notice that when people visited the church, they were already Christians. And I realized if we're going to take this message about Jesus to other people, we're going to have to go outside of the church to do it, because they're just not coming into the church anymore for answers. My friends and I were going to a lot of concerts and local music acts, and just over time we started to notice these people are actually really interested in spiritual questions. Some of them are even searching for God and already having conversations about Jesus. But if they want to go further, they don't feel like they have any place to go. Maybe they're not comfortable with the church, maybe they've had a bad experience, or maybe they just plain don't have a history with it and they didn't grow up in it. So we decided we were going to try to make a place for them. A brewery seemed to be a natural place to create a church for them because they're already having deep conversations about life in these locations, and they're already hanging out there. So that's how the idea for Church in a Brewery was born.
So that's mostly our presentation. We were having a goal of around 8:15 or so, so we're pretty much on track here. But we would like to have at least one question. When we get one question, then everybody can go. So all we need is one. No, but in all honesty, we would like to open it up for questions for a few minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Who's paying for the beer?
It's not me.
Where is the beer? It says have a beer and discuss Jesus.
Here? I know. I'm sorry. We didn't bring the beer, and it's against policy. No, the bar will be open at the brewery during our meeting, and people can buy it just like any other time. There's no deal on it or anything, but if they want to buy a beer, they can.
And you as the church are not providing beer?
No, we're not providing beer, and we've talked about having a limit, like a 1 beer limit for us as leaders. I mean, we don't want to mess up our theology or anything. So.
Some would probably be okay with 2, maybe.
Yeah. Well, although some of their beers are like 10%. I mean, 2 beers would mess you up. Any other questions or anything?
What part of the bar is at? Because we've been back where the concert was with your area. Is it going to be back there, or is it going to be in the restaurant area too?
Yes. So we're going to be on the bar side. We'll have that whole side. It seats about 40 people or so. And the conversation was we start there, and if we outgrow that area,
then we approach the restaurant about using their side, but they're subleasing from Augustino. So I would imagine it'd be okay. They're also closed Monday nights, so that's something that is feasible. But if we get too big for that side, we can go over to the other side and get maybe 15 or 20 more seats. But it's a small place. We don't want to get too big anyways.
The capacity actually says 250 on that side.
Does it really 250?
Yeah, I don't think I'd want 250 people.
No.
Maybe the whole building.
Yeah, in the whole building, on the restaurant side, it says 250. No, but we got plenty of room to grow there.
So how many meetings per month are you looking at? Or
Once a week, every Monday night. Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
And how's your funding?
It's decent. We're at our goal to get started, and we feel like we're kind of starting to stabilize a little. We can always use help. Any more help? I mean, we'll be looking for more fundraisers from time to time because I know we've got some donors who committed for a year that are some big donors, and then at the end of the year, I don't know that they'll continue. So we could always use help, but whatever extra we get, we're putting towards starting the next one. So we'll be investing in more Brewery Church plants, provided this is the first one is successful. But we'll be looking as soon as someone emerges who might run the next one, we'll start looking in that direction because we feel like multiplication needs to be in our DNA from the get-go. If we're really going to multiply, then that's got to be one of our foundational qualities.
Wichita has several breweries with very good rooms and such like that could. So we were originally thinking, west side, central, and then the east side. So River City has a really nice room up top. So there's some really good opportunities there.
Oh, and Aeroplanes Brewing just went up for sale. So if anybody wants to buy it, turn it into a brewery church. The door's open.
So what is the biggest current need that you guys have? If you could pick one specific one.
I mean, we do still need. We are still needing financial partners, but I think we need leaders.
Okay.
I think we're going to need to be training people for our meeting to help facilitate discussion. And if I'm not there to give a talk or something or introduce a topic, but basically, let's say there's how many tables are in that room? Like 7 or 8 or something. Mm-hmm. There's 7 or 8 tables in that room. We want to equip some leaders to kind of subtly be around to keep conversations on track and to help people so they don't veer off into some spiritual abyss talking about I don't know, something crazy. We want to be there as subtle guides, so we will always be looking for people to train.
A big need in my mind is we need your friends. We need your people that are seeking. We need the people that you want to reach out to. We need them to come. And they're the ones that we're going to be reaching out to. So in my mind, that's the big need.
So when people give, where does that money go into? It goes into advertising, some of that stuff, but what else is that going into since the guy's waiving the fee?
I'm part-time. That's about 20 hours a week for me.
Okay.
And then, I mean, some of it we're going to end up using for charitable causes and benevolence and stuff like that. But I'm the only staff member right now.
But we definitely want to give back to the brewery as well. I mean, we want to make it worth his time, and we want to be able to pay him. Sure. The owner of Augustino's works. He's the campus manager at WSU West. He works every day at the brewery. He goes to work every day and then goes to the brewery at night. And he's got a wife and 3 kids, and the kids are always at the bar.
A kid on the way.
And 2 kids and one on the way.
So what's your average monthly cost for operating this thing, Jeff?
It's probably going to be $2,000.
$2,000 a month?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's less right now.
And well, where are you at on that number?
We're We're probably running 1,800,
Okay.
so we're close.
So, because you just seem like very nice people who are trying to give your time and effort. And I hate asking people for money, and I think maybe you do too.
I'm very bad at it.
So,
Yes.
so maybe because I have nothing to gain from this, I'm going to ask for them. They need money.
Amen.
And so I'm just going to say that out there. I'm a church planter. I need money too if you need it. But they need money for what they're doing. They're giving their time and their energy. So I'm going to ask for them right now.
I also probably have a comment. I don't know if this has changed any, but since he did waive the fee, he is still expecting that there will be sales. So hopefully the people that come like the beer and are willing to buy one, because I think there's going to be like a minimum sales quota so that we have to meet.
He waived that too.
He waived that too? Wow.
But see, we would really like to get to the point where we can kick something back to them though, because see, he waived that because he can come in and work on his day off and not have to pay an employee. But he sacrificed his day off for us, so now he's working 7 days a week. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, you're gonna die if you don't take some time off. He's like, oh, that's okay. I work too much as it is. And but the good thing about the brewery is since they brought the restaurant side in, part of the reason we picked the place was because it needed some help, and we felt like, well, hey, this is a great ministry opportunity. We can help this business and we can help people. When the restaurant came in, it brought some financial stability and increased traffic to the brewery. So they're getting to the place where they can hire an employee, and we'll get to the place where we can pay them some for that room and be paying that person's salary. No big deal. So ultimately, that's a goal of ours, and my goal is to give that guy some relief because he's done a lot for us.
The restaurant is Angry Elephant Barbecue, and they're the ones that provided the meal for this evening. So we wanted to patron them as well.
So do you have a place on your website that people can give?
Yeah. So at breweryministries.org, there's a give tab, and it goes through MoGive, I believe. Oh, Tithely. I used to use MoGive at my last church. I got mixed up. It goes through Tithely.
Tithely, TITHE.OY. When you first give, I think it makes you create an account, but it took me the first time probably under 2 minutes to give.
So, by a show of hands, how many people have been to Augustino's? Okay. It's a great place.
So I think I'm good. If we have any more questions, but take the time to meet Dana and Heath. No, not the other way around. They're going to be sitting in the back too, and have their the mailing list ready to go there, and they've got more packets and more trifolds to give away, and then take more of these cards and so on and so forth. So that's all from me.
Yeah. Well, we are really thankful that you came out to hear our vision, and we're just kind of moving forward in this thing together, and I hope that you'll kind of keep tabs on us, and we can somehow reach the people in your lives together. But yeah, thank you very much for coming.
Take your cups
Did
home.
you have something?
Yeah. Let's gather around these guys and pray for them. Why don't you want to come over? Let's just by way of the offering plate. Dana, come here.